Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina, made to create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Susan Khalje of Susan Khalje Couture. She was born and raised in Baltimore and learned to sew in high school. She trained at Chez Cez and Bez in New York and then worked at a ready-to-wear company on 7th Avenue. Returning from living abroad for many years, she opened her wedding gown and evening wear couture business in Baltimore. She's the longest contributing author to Threads magazine, author of the books Bridal Couture and Linen and Cotton. She hosted So Much More on HDTV and DIY for 6 years, founded the Couture Sewing School in 1993, and teaches nationally and internationally, hosting an annual trip for groups of couture enthusiasts to Paris and London. And she recently started an online forum for couture sewing enthusiasts. Susan lives in Baltimore with her husband. And Susan, welcome to So and So.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
I am so glad you are. We're going to learn a lot about couture today, and you have some interesting stories to share. But I want to start in the beginning. How did you learn to sew?
You know, I learned to sew in high school. I had a grandmother who sewed, and I think I kind of fooled around a little bit with her. I know, lovely little sewing room. And it was really in high school, you know, back in the day where sewing was a part of the curriculum. So thank goodness for that, because, you know, and I don't know how many days a week we had sewing, but it was a regular thing year after year. So you got that wonderful foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really the beginning of it all. And my parents were happy to buy fabrics. I had a decent sewing machine, and you know, it was something that I think, like a lot of us, I was kind of good at. I think in a natural kind of way, and I think in those days I probably got about as far as you could get in classes and being self-taught. And you know, I think what a lot of us did, you'd buy a sewing pattern that would have some new technique in it and see how you did with that. You know, you think, oh gosh, I've never had a pattern that has a French cuff or a proper collar or whatever. And you sort of push yourself along that way. So until I got to Cez and Bez, you know, I always thought I went about as far as I could get on my own.
Do you remember the first thing you sewed?
I don't remember the first thing, but I do remember a couple of things. Oh my goodness. I remember buying a lot of, it was sort of lavender and cream check. And I made myself, it was Easter, and I made a dress. I must have had a lot of it because I made a dress. And then I made myself a pair of shorts. And then I made myself a cape. And I remember there was kind of this lavender lining to it. And I did some sort of a decorative stitch on the side of it. And yeah, that one kind of stands out. And there was a yellow silk shantung outfit that had a scallop edged jacket. Remember that? Yeah.
So very distinct. Not just your basic pillowcase or apron.
No, although the first project I remember in sewing class, I think was a curler cover. You know, a curler, the thing you put over your head to cover up your curlers.
Oh, sure.
Started that way. And then I do remember a purple gingham pillow that closed with a slip stitch. And I thought it was just the most magical stitch I've ever seen in my life, that it sealed up this edge. Yeah.
Susan, we're going to talk a lot about couture today. So just to kind of level set things, can you explain to us what couture means? What is it?
Yeah, I get, doing what I do, I get asked this a lot. And I think one definition that makes sense to a lot of people, I think of it as sewing's equivalent of gourmet cooking. So you kind of get this special recipe with special ingredients, and you take a lot of care and time to put it together, and you get just a very spectacular result. Now, do most people cook that way every day? No, maybe not. But that's kind of the only way I like to sew. I think of it as sewing without shortcuts, maybe sewing the way your grandmother sewed. And I think also what's very, very important with it is a love of the process. I think you just have to love the doing of it. You have to love every step kind of along the way. So there's that to it.
The comparison to gourmet cooking is very vivid to me. So thank you for
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Now you trained in couture at Chez and Bez in New York,
Hmm.
and this is a new place for us to learn about on this podcast. So would you tell us about it and why it's
Oh,
renowned?
yeah. Well, it doesn't exist anymore. I would have been, I think, the heir apparent, but I decided to do other things. And I had lived in London for a long time. I used to be a musician, a pianist. And I decided to move back to New York, and I'd injured my wrist. So that was kind of the end of music. And I had a girlfriend whose grandmother was a client at Cez and Bez. And all my friends knew I sewed. And my girlfriend somehow knew that the elder partner, Cez, was retiring. She's an elderly French woman at that point. And my friend said, you're really good at sewing, and you do need a job, and they need someone. So maybe you could just go along and see. And
Hmm.
honestly, it had never in my wildest dreams been what I thought would be my career path. So I went in, and I remember I took a blouse that I'd made for my best friend for a birthday present, sort of a black, sort of a flowered chiffon with lots of ruffles. And I was hired. And honestly, it made perfect sense from the minute I walked in. And I just thought, yeah, this is the way to do it. This is it. Yeah. I just kind of got it. And I think I was so lucky, but they were so lucky too, because they'd had this talented little sponge who happened to come in, and I could just do it. It made sense to me. And what I love, well, we each got to finish a garment. I think every one of these establishments is set up a little differently, but you had your garment, you did the whole thing. And I remember my very first day, I was given, it was I think the sort of silk outfit that a lady who lunches might have worn. And I was given that, and I was just told to baste it together. And while it was new, like I said, it was so logical, which is one of the things I love the most about couture sewing. There's no smoke and mirrors. It's dead logic the whole time, with so many reasons why you do something the way you do. And it just appealed to me, and I could do it, and I loved doing it. So that was it. Oh, and also the pace of it was lovely. We were never, every now and then, if Mrs. Rockefeller needed her evening gown that night, then it was kind of all hands on deck. But um, we worked at a lovely pace, and
Hmm.
I like that very much, because, as I said earlier, I think you really have to love the process in this, you know, and that was a very nice thing for me to fall in love and get acquainted with the process in a not a leisurely way, but in a nicely paced way.
So, interesting point. After you trained in this, you loved the
Mm.
process. There was a nice pace. After you trained, you went to work for a ready-to-wear company. So, what
Yeah.
was this like after such
Oh,
specialized training? What a difference!
well, I think the fact that I didn't stay doing that is your answer. Well, so I left Cez and Bez because, what I did was couture construction, which really is my great love. It's the thing I love most of all. But I knew that if I wanted to be on my own, I would have to learn other aspects of the business. And, and I knew also that if I'd stayed at Cez and Bez, I would have inherited that clientele and that way of doing things. And you know what it's like when you're young and independent, you want to do it your own way.
Hmm.
So I left. And then just as I was setting up my studio, I was living in New York, kind of rearranging my apartment so I could have clients, I was asked to be part of a business we manufactured abroad, and we had a showroom on 7th Avenue. And I could do it. I could sell that stuff, but we could have been selling widgets, and it was all about the bottom line.
Hmm.
Not that everything isn't, but it was just too much the hard sell for me. I used to
Hmm.
think, golly, you could sell a blouse with 3 arms, and if you could sell them, it would be the greatest thing in the world. But it didn't really speak to me the way couture did. So, you know how these things are, a number of, you go down different paths, but a couple of years in Europe, and eventually we ended up back in Baltimore. And that's when I kind of reclaimed my couture roots.
You mentioned you lived in Europe for a few years.
Mm.
What took you there? Take us on that journey. Where did you
Oh,
live?
well,
Did you sew and design? What was that
I
like?
didn't then. No, actually the short story. So the company that I worked in on 7th Avenue, we actually manufactured in Afghanistan back in the day.
Hmm.
Long time ago when it was a kingdom, it was just a magical, magical place to be. And that's where I met my husband, and we went back there to live. But as we all know, politically things took a very sinister turn. So we had to escape, and we lived in Amsterdam for a few
Mm.
years, which was wonderful. It was I called it my jams and jellies period. I was raising my kids, doing lots of knitting. I wasn't doing anything professional at that point. And after a few years there, we came back to this country. And that's when we were living here in the country. And I wanted to get back to sewing of some sort. So I contacted a woman named Nina Hyde, who was kind of the legendary fashion editor of the Washington Post. And I was sort of saying, do you think there's a place for me near Washington? I have this couture training. Do you think I could develop a career? And she very kindly got back in touch and did an article that I was featured in. And one of the first people who contacted me through the article was somebody who wanted a wedding dress.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, well, that might make sense, because you can be well paid for them. They're all different. It's a happy occasion. You can really lavish these couture techniques that on this wonderful project. So that honestly was kind of how I started doing wedding dresses. We had done some wedding dresses at Cez and Bez, but it wasn't a specialty
Hmm.
really. Um, but it kind of occurred to me that okay, might be a good direction to go in. So that's kind of what started it.
You used an interesting word when you were talking about Afghanistan.
Mm,
You didn't say you had to leave. You said you had to escape.
yeah, we did.
Was that a, a dangerous thing for you more than just
Mm-hmm.
we're going to go now? Was that more of a harrowing experience?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Um, the government in those days was very unstable,
Hmm.
uh, and changing all the time. And yeah, we did have to leave a lot of stuff behind and just escape. Yeah. Hmm.
But
Yeah.
you made it.
We made it. Yes. It's funny. There's certain things in your life you would like to do over.
Hmm.
That is not one of them I would
No,
like to,
no,
to
been there,
do
done
over.
that.
Yes. Done that. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, it turned out fine, but it was not such a happy situation, sadly.
So on a more upbeat note,
Yes.
you got a request for a wedding dress,
Mm,
and that
hmm.
kind of started the whole process. You opened your business. Would you take us through your process for designing couture?
Yeah, yeah. And what was fun about, and of course, this is I didn't have a million customers overnight. You have to build a business slowly, and this was long before the internet. So, you had to pound on doors and try to get people who you think you could help and get your name out there. And Um, at one point I was named Best of Baltimore Wedding Dresses because I think Baltimore Magazine, how these magazines in town do their best of whatever thing.
Hmm.
And I think occasionally they'd call and say, oh, what are the predictions for wedding gowns for the next year? And I think the editor said, well, if you're ever in downtown, stop by. And I thought, well, they opened the door. I'm going to drive right through it. And I said, yeah, well, as a matter of fact,
Hmm.
going to be downtown next Wednesday. Would that be convenient? So I went down to their office with some wedding gowns, which people always love to see. It's such an attention getter. You come in with these
Hmm.
big things. And so I got to know them and they got to know me. And then as I said, I got best wedding gowns or best custom wedding gowns. And then you have to build your business, which I have to say, if you identify primarily as an artist, that business side of it can be very hard.
Mm-hmm.
to develop. I was very shy, and oh my goodness, there were lots of times where I would just sit in my car and just didn't have the nerve to go in someplace, and tell somebody what I did.
Mm-hmm.
But, you eventually get a little braver and tell yourself, okay, this is a democracy. They can't shoot me. They may show me the door, but,
Sure.
and you develop more and more of a backbone. And I think I have to say, what makes it all possible is, for any artist, you have to have confidence in what you can do
Mm-hmm.
and your product. And once you have that, then you're good. So, but you spoke about the design process. I didn't ever think of myself as a designer,
Mm-hmm.
but what I am good at is collaborating and listening to what somebody wants and sort of pulling out of them what they would want in a dress. And there were certain leading questions you could ask a bride. Once you get into the budget and once you know that this is going to be your kind of client, whose clothes do you like? Oh, you're an Audrey Hepburn girl. Okay. What is your favorite dress? The favorite dress you own. What dress of yours do you just love wearing? And you ask them to bring pictures. And so you slowly get a sense of what they want. And then you show them different fabrics. And then it really becomes a very exciting kind of collaboration.
I like that collaboration.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Now, do you have a favorite piece that you've created?
There was one dress. I was thinking about this earlier. She'd been a costume designer from San Francisco, but she and her husband moved to New York, and they had taken a honeymoon before the wedding, and she had bought a lot of really exquisite lace. I mean, like 17th century museum quality lace. Um, and she wanted it incorporated into the sleeves of her dress. So, those sleeves where the elbow, it gets bigger and it kind of droops down. And so there were layers and layers of this exquisite antique lace in those sleeves. And it had a very interesting detachable train. It was kind of engineered in a sort of clever way. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just, other than these very elaborate sleeves, it was a very plain, clean, gorgeous dress. So that was beautiful. And then one of the last big dresses I did, this was one of these 500 people in the basilica kind of wedding. So for that, you need a big dress, right? You need to have quite a dress if you're being married in such a setting. And that was a very beautiful dress, lots of exquisite lace. And I remember there was the top, it looked as if the top that had a mandarin collar and sleeves was part of the dress, but it was really just a jacket that came off, and then you had this sort of halter dress under it. And for some reason, I remember that there were 55 buttons down the
Oh
back
my! Mm-hmm.
between this top and then the dress itself, and that was really a very, very, very beautiful dress. Yeah, it was lovely.
Sounds special.
Yeah, it was.
Do you have any stories you can share with us about working with someone notable, special that?
Not so much. I mean, at Cez and Bez, we had a lot of well-known clients.
Mm-hmm.
We were on the Upper East Side, so there was, I mentioned earlier, Mrs. Rockefeller. Well, Mary Rockefeller was a client. Mm-hmm. Lauren Bacall was, Kitty Carlisle. I mean, these are all names from the past. Mm-hmm. But so we had a lot of those sorts of clients. Mrs. Richard Rodgers, mm-hmm. And they were, lovely to work with. But that was kind of a different era.
It was a very elegant time.
It was, absolutely. And in fact, I think much of what we did at Cez and Bez was very elegant. It really was. And the quality, I have to say, was superb, just exquisite. So to mention the name Cez and Bez, to go back to this for a second, Bez was the owner with Cez. Cez was the French one. Bez was an American woman who had trained at a trade school in New York when they had trade schools for sewing, back in the 40s. And for so many years, she was the person to whom I compared myself in terms of skill. She just sewed absolutely beautifully. Just best sewer I ever met.
So, Susan, I want to quote you here. You said, mm-hmm. While I've done a number of things, what they do have in common is fascination with and dedication to couture sewing.
Mm.
So pretty much everything I do relates to that.
Yeah.
So explain this to us.
Well, it's like I said, it's the only way I like to sew. I always say I'm a one trick pony. I'm a very skilled one trick pony, but I'm a one trick pony in that I think, and I said this once in a Threads interview, and I thought, oh goodness, that sounds snooty. But I did say, to me, any other kind of sewing is a compromise because this is the way to do it, where you start with a muslin in which you perfect fit and proportion, and your fabrics are just wonderful. And you figure out the engineering, which is a big part of these garments. The engineering has to be right.
Mm-hmm.
You have the best construction. All of these elements have to kind of come together. And when they do, design, fabric, fit and proportion, construction, and engineering, those are kind of, to me, the 5 elements. And when those come together, you get something just extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
You really do.
Would you mention those 5 elements again
Of
for
course.
us?
Mm-hmm. Well, so there's design. The design has to be special.
Mm-hmm.
It has to say enough. It has to say not too much. You want to have something special in terms of design. And then fabric. You have to have really extraordinary fabric. And then there's fit. But to me, that's kind of a 2-part thing because I always say the forgotten stepsister there is proportion, because
Mm-hmm.
proportion is every bit as important as fit. So there's that. That's got to be right. And then you've got to get the engineering right. Look in terms of a wedding dress. Oh my goodness, you've got a lot of weight. You've got a lot going on, and it has to be engineered right, because if it's not, then it'll just collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And then construction. That just has to be perfect. So, the reason I think of those 5 elements, I had to give a lecture years and years ago about couture, and I called it the couture star. I just remember drawing this 5-point star. And
Sure.
those, to me, are the 5 things. And if any of those, if any one of those points is lacking, doesn't work. You can have the most beautifully designed dress and great construction and but if the engineering isn't right, then
Mm-hmm.
then you're doomed. Or any of the you really, to me, you can't do without any of those 5 elements.
Yeah, that's some good advice to share with us.
Mm.
So you and Kenneth D. King, who is also a guest on this
Yes.
podcast, a
Yeah.
wonderful human being,
Yes, he is.
did a YouTube video, and it was called "The Ethics of Wearing Vintage Couture."
Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty interesting title. So what's this all about? Why is this
Oh, well,
important?
this was in the wake of the Kim Kardashian wearing the Marilyn Monroe dress,
Mm-hmm.
which Kenneth was horrified by. And who knows if she destroyed? There's that. But having been around a lot of vintage couture and seen a lot of collections, I think I'm a little less precious about it than Kenneth. Partly because these things do have a shelf life. Um, there's a lot about them that's absolutely wonderful, but to me, they were meant to be worn then or now. Not that you go out and you wear a couture garment around, a vintage couture garment, but to me, I don't know, there's something to be seen and used and learned from rather than something you wouldn't ever touch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does.
maybe I have a slightly, maybe, I don't know, more practical, more jaundiced, whatever, but there is a lot of lovely couture stuff out there. And, I've been in couture collections where, oh my God, they're wearing the gloves and, oh, nothing could be touched. And, well, wouldn't it be nice if I could just have a look inside? Maybe I'd learn something before this thing gets packed away in a box for the next 10 years. What's gained by that? So I don't, to me, there's something I guess I'm not quite so afraid to touch or interact with.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I think, it was a shame if that dress did get compromised, but I kind of thought of it was the ultimate publicity stunt, right? What could be a crazier combination than, Kim Kardashian wearing the dress. Oh, and I did say, this dress was the one that Marilyn Monroe wore, and kind of sketchy circumstances. It wasn't like she wore it when she got the Nobel Peace Prize.
Mm-hmm.
She wore it to sing this version of Happy Birthday to the president. So, yeah,
And that video is on YouTube, and it's called
yes,
"The Ethics of Wearing Vintage
yes,
Couture." It's right there.
yeah,
This is
yeah. There
great.
you go. Yeah.
So you say that you are a good example of figuring out how to carve your own path
Mm-hmm.
to find a way to do what you love to do and what you
Yeah.
want to do. Tell us about this. What is that?
Well, what I wanted to do, there really wasn't anybody who did what I did. I live in the country, and I've known dressmakers who went under because they had to pay a steep rent on some beautiful studio, and they couldn't make it work. So I thought, okay, well, I want to be based at home just because I want to be around my kids and my husband, and I don't want to have to go somewhere to work every day. I want to be here. But I thought, wow, this is a bit unorthodox, and I'm going to expect these clients to come here, um, and I did feel kind of apologetic about it in the beginning, but then I kind of went back to the confidence thing. And I think if you know what you're doing, if you're good at what you're doing, then you can get it to work in a sort of unorthodox way. And in the end, I did not have any trouble getting clients. And I used to think, well, maybe the first time people come out here to the country, they might think, where in the world am I going? But then I always felt once I got them here and they could see what I did and see what I was capable of, then we're good. Then I could kind of conquer that. And then I started some teaching. I was in one of the local fabric stores once, and I took in a dress I'd made. I wanted to show my friend who was the head of the fabric, the evening wear department. And she said, would you like to teach class? And I thought, oh, okay. So I did that. And then at a certain point, the wonderful couture teacher, Roberta Carr, would advertise these sewing seminars that she did out in California. And I remember saying to my husband, oh gosh, I'd love to go to one of those. And he said, go to one. You should be teaching them. Don't you love it when people come up with these suggestions of what you should
Yes,
do?
indeed.
And then I kind of thought, oh, wow, maybe I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I slowly started. And when I first started, it was the bridal sewing school. And then I kind of got tired of that. And plus people would say, oh, I'd like to come, but I don't want to make a wedding dress. So that's when it became the couture sewing school, a little bit of a broader focus. And, kind of went from there. And then, I don't know, I spent a lot of time in Paris, and I had, a lot of connections there. And then people would say, oh, well, why didn't you take people to Paris? And I, me, I always like the next challenge. And I thought, oh, all right, well, let me see if I could put that together in a way that I felt was worthy of people's time and money. So that's worked well. So I think, honestly, if you're kind of devoted to a craft, I think it's kind of natural that you look for different facets of it, different directions in which you can go. And then, of course, I started writing for Threads, and which has been wonderful. And then at one point, I was approached to do the TV show, and I'd never in a million years thought of that. But I sort of thought, oh, well, that might be interesting. Let's see about that. So again, I think I've somehow fitted my love for couture sewing in these different directions. But that's like I said, I'm a one-trick pony, but that part has been constant. But the iterations of it, so that's where the difference lies.
So you mentioned teaching sewing, and you have this sewing club.
Oh, yes.
And you call it educational and a way for couture sewers to connect. And this podcast is about community and connections. Tell us about this and how this applies to your sewing club.
Well, it was interesting. I was teaching in Australia. I taught quite a bit. And one of my students said something like, you're not going to be able to do this forever. Oh, well, thank you. And she said, what are you going to do? How are you going to connect people when you can no longer travel? Because I have to say, when you have a class or a group, I just got back from Paris, you have a group and you become kind of an organism and you become your own little social world. And it's fabulous how it happens, when you're teaching a 6-day seminar if you're in Paris. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if somehow you could create a little bit of that spirit, a little bit of that connectiveness online? And that's why I started the club, to create some of that spirit and that sharing and that enthusiasm. So that's how that happened. And it's been great.
We found with many people who have joined us on So and So that when they have an online community, it transcends what they're there to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the people in the room share stories of their lives and challenges that they've had or joys that they've had. Do you find that this happens with your group as well?
Well, it happens in person, but it's something that on purpose I've kept the personal stuff off the club, because there are a lot of members, and if I allow, everybody, let's, send our best thoughts for Betty, her husband's having heart surgery on Tuesday, then it becomes nothing but that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very rare that I allow anything like that, because honestly, everybody has something all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want it to become taken over by that. So we keep it to, it's very friendly and lovely and
Mm-hmm.
supportive, but it's supportive about sewing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of careful with that, because I just didn't want it to get into other stuff that I don't know, it just didn't seem wildly appropriate. So it's more supporting your sewing adventures, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. And other stuff, gosh, exhibitions, podcasts, articles. It's not just, here's what I think you should do with that hem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's broader than just that. And also, we offer certain videos. We're actually about to start a sew along. We have a new pattern coming out. It's a funnel neck jacket, and it's nice because it's actually princess seams can go a lot of different places. They can go into the arm side, they can go into the shoulder, but you can also have a neck princess seam, right? Where you kind of have the extension of the princess seam goes up into the neck, which, if you have a funnel neck, speaking technically here for a minute, is a really good idea, because it allows you to get some shaping there in the front,
Mm-hmm.
because our necks just don't go up, they go out. And if you don't allow some shaping beyond the shoulder seam, you get drag lines. So anyway, that's kind of the genesis of what I wanted to have in that pattern. So we will soon do a video for it, but I want to do a dry run before we do the proper videos. So on the club, I think tomorrow we're going to start filming the dry run for one of the versions of this funnel neck coat. We're doing the funnel neck coat jacket.
Mm-hmm. Look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
You also mentioned, and I want to learn a little bit more about this, you take a group of couture enthusiasts to Paris. As a matter of fact, I think you just got back from one of those trips.
I did. I got back Monday afternoon.
Just got back.
Just got back. It's amazing.
So take us along with you. Tell us about the trip and what do you all do?
Well, it's amazing. I think of Paris as our spiritual home. The first place, it's so beautiful. And I always joke that I could just park people on a street corner and pick them up a week later, and they would have seen lovely things. But, we start, the first day is always easy. Everybody's kind of jet lagged. And so we have our little introduction, lunch, orientation. Then we go on a boat ride down the Seine, it's called a bateau mouche. And it's good for jet lag to get out in the fresh air, but equally important, it's like when you realize, oh my goodness, I'm in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's the Louvre. Oh, there's the Eiffel Tower. So it kind of sinks in a very, very lovely way. And of course, we have to bond as a group, so we're kind of getting to know one another. And then we go out for crepes around the corner that night. And then actually what we did this this past time. There's a wonderful designer, a good friend in Paris, who she's actually Finnish. So she has shops in Paris and Helsinki. And she's extraordinary because she's absolutely devoted to doing things the right way, ecologically. And she now no longer has dead stock. Everything is done to order.
Mm-hmm.
And she really has always had this very, very responsible perspective. So we visit her. Oh, and we went to the Dior now has a very beautiful. It's both permanent and changing. It's a big permanent exhibit, but parts of it change every year. So we went to the Dior exhibit. We also go to some. Oh well, one of the things that is so important, I think, in Paris is this. There's a wonderful French word, patrimoine, which is patrimony, heritage, and there's so many businesses where, I'm the seventh generation, or this business has been going since 1750. So there's a very wonderful firm called De Klerk, and they do passementerie, which is tassels and braids, and it's unbelievable what they do. And as the owner Jérôme says, we start with a thread. They spin it, they dye it, they weave it, they shape it, and we're talking about this all started at the time of Versailles, and it's unbelievable the devotion they have to this. And a couple of wonderful fabric stores that sell end cuts from the couture houses. Met up with a couple of wonderful journalists. I have a friend who has the best collection in the world of Christian Lacroix, and she brings some couture garments of his that we can look through. We spend a day with Julian Christofoli, who I've worked with for years. He's actually our pattern maker. And he was Azzedine Alaya's assistant, and he is the most gifted pattern maker on earth and has the most fabulous aesthetic sense. Because, we referred earlier to fit and proportion. Well, Julian's eye is so exquisite. So he does a day-long demonstration where he does moulage, which is the French word for draping. And he does incredible demonstration where you just see these patterns magically appear before your eyes. We always go to the ballet at the very beautiful Palais Garnier. There are other bits and pieces thrown in, but it's a look at I think of it as sort of the building blocks of couture, kind of what it is.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And it's funny. I think if you want to be really overly generalizing, there may be two ways to develop friendships. And we say in America, you're somebody's best friend after 5 minutes, right? Very friendly, right? But it's very different in France. And you really earn a friendship over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's lovely because at the end of that, you have a very profound friendship. You really do, a very deep, meaningful friendship. So all the people we visit are very, very dear friends, people I've known for decades. And happily, that friendship is something that I can share with my group. So they get a lovely, immediate entree into a very special level of connectedness in Paris. I mean, they'd be lovely people anyway, but it's
sure.
very different when you go to such a place with me because these are my friends, and I think it just becomes all the more special.
How many of these trips have you taken?
Oh goodness,
A few.
a lot. To Paris, well over 20. Yeah, probably 25 or something. I don't know. Yeah, and it's it's just an amazing place. It really is. And they I call it the Paris effect. Things that you wouldn't think are so important are important, and it's very lovely. I remember once I was getting a gift wrap, and I remember the person said, "Why, what's the occasion?" In this country, you'd be lucky if they wrapped it. They'd probably just give you a piece of paper and say, "Oh, you can wrap that at home."
Or do you want green or yellow?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I remember the person said, "Well, what is the occasion?" Because the gift wrap has to reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
And I send a lot of flowers after the trip to the various people we've been with, and the florist always wants to know, who are they going to? Oh, it's a man. Oh, he's an archivist. I know just the thing. So it's all very much, those sorts of things matter on a certain level. And I find that very touching and very nice. Very nice.
Susan, what's next for you?
Oh, I was thinking about that. I think, honestly, more of the same. More of the same. I love teaching. I think, as I said earlier, I think we create a very special atmosphere. And I always feel that, I can't promise what you'll do in class, but I can make you better. I can take you to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very special privilege for me. I love the Paris trips. The club is great fun. We have more patterns coming out, so there's that. In fact, when I was in Paris, I had a beautiful vintage coat, and Julian, as I mentioned, does our pattern work. So he was asking, he said, "Look, this has been sitting here for a while. Shall we finish it up?" And I saw him, and I tried it on, and it's just gorgeous. And I said, "Absolutely, yeah. Let's carry on with this one." So that's exciting. So honestly, I think I do have this kind of kit idea in the back of my head that I've got to develop, kind of a couture notebook kit sort of thing. So there's that. But honestly, I think basically more of the same, and it's my great privilege to be able to do that.
So, if more of the same is what's next, what's your dream?
Oh goodness, what's my dream? I think to have shared what I was lucky enough to be exposed to with other people. I think so. Yeah, because kind of I sometimes feel like a bit of a dinosaur, I must say. But they're worthy techniques and beautiful techniques, and it would be, I think, really awful if they were lost. So I'm happy to do my little part in keeping that going on some level, I think.
In our conversation today, out of everything that we talked about, is there a question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
No, your questions were wonderful. No, I don't think so. No.
This has been just a joy. I've learned so much. I feel like you took us back to the elegant time of couture. I feel like I experienced Paris with you. This was great. Thank you so much for sitting with us and sharing your story today.
My absolute pleasure. I was honored to be a part of this, truly.
Susan, when people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think on the website, susankhalje.com.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if they want to, I think Susan at Susan Khalje works also. But yeah, through the website, it's probably easiest.
And Khalje is Khalje.
Yes, unusual name. Yeah, I went from Anderson to Khalje, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Susan, so much.
Oh, my thanks to you.
Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you. Someone for whom sewing is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something much bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or just complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, sewandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I do want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.